Welcome to this edition of Great Books, a lively discussion of a selection from the canon of exceptional literature. Here's your host, Jack Hatfield.
Welcome. Thanks for joining us for the Great Books Show. I'm Jack Hatfield. Our panel meets monthly to discuss great works of classic and modern literature. Today we're discussing an excerpt from The Problems of Philosophy by Bertrand Russell. Jake will introduce this work. Jake?
British-born Bertrand Russell is one of the great thinkers of the 20th century. Born in 1872, he was raised by free-thinking parents until their decease when Russell was 8. Russell was raised into adulthood by his father's more traditional parents. Bertrand Russell died in 1970. Russell studied mathematics and logic at Oxford University, where he met Alfred North Whitehead. The two later collaborated on the logical classic Principia Mathematica. Along with mathematics and logic, philosophy and ethics were two other major Russell interests. Tonight we discuss 3 excerpts from his more philosophical writing of the first decade of the 20th century. They are summarized under the heading Philosophy and Knowledge. In these excerpts, Russell begins by taking up the questions related to truth and falsity. From these, he moves on to the questions of belief and knowledge. And finally, these prior discussions then form the basis for a consideration of questions relating to the value of philosophy.
Thanks, Jake. My first question is a very broad one. According to Russell, what is truth? Does anyone want to take a shot at it?
Well, he sort of defines it as a property of beliefs, that a belief can be true or it can be false. And for there to be truth, there has to be a philosophy where beliefs exist, right? But truth doesn't depend only on what one person believes. It has to correspond to some fact out in the outer world.
But what didn't... Okay. Anyone else?
Does that make sense?
Yes?
Okay.
Anybody else?
I think that's it.
Is it possible to discern a fact out in the outer world or inner world?
Like, how do you know something?
Yes.
Oh, well, he goes into a whole chapter on how you know things, okay? And sometimes he says that only one person can discern a fact, if it's a mental fact about how they feel. And he goes into a great big talk about one of Shakespeare's plays about whether two people love each other, and about how do you know whether that's true or not, that that person loves the other person. And it's that only the person doing the loving can decide whether that's true. However, there are other facts that everyone in the world is accessible to.
Let me kind of interrupt. Is what I was asking is kind of follow up. What you were describing at first is the correspondence theory of truth.
Uh-huh.
Okay. Is it possible for one person, anybody, to discern a fact, according to Russell? Is it just one of these worthless theories that you throw out and has no meaning?
That's an interesting question. I'm not sure that he ever actually addresses that. I mean, in terms of the things in the. I mean, he talks about for what Maureen was talking about. Was my understanding was the degrees of certainty, that you can have absolute certainty when you have an intuitive knowledge of something by acquaintance, like Desdemona saying Desdemona loves Othello, the only person who can have an absolute certainty about that on the grounds of acquaintance is Desdemona. Everybody else's certainty is less than that. But in terms of whether you can actually discern a fact, I think he just simply takes it for granted that there's an outside world. I don't think he ever actually, unless I missed it, I don't think he ever actually addresses the issue of, are there facts? Are there statements of fact? Are there just statements about the way things are? And can you discern that?
Right.
Can you discern that?
I thought he did.
He
Did
says
he
the
actually?
fact is a one-to-one correspondence.
But you can't know it.
It's a match. You can't ever know it completely because all facts are complex. There's no such thing as a simple fact.
But he says that there are premises which you can know intuitively, and that's intuitive knowledge of something. And then there's derivative knowledge, and he defines that as derivative knowledge is what is validly deduced from premises known intuitively. So he actually believes that you can know something, you can know facts.
Whoa. There's only degrees of opinion for facts.
Right. And he didn't define intuitive.
No, I didn't think he said that.
Yeah,
I think he said there were degrees
the
of
fundamental
opinion
thing,
for
the
facts.
perception is acquaintance with something.
Right.
And whatever you experience that's outside of you, that's real. About that, at some point you begin to make judgments and construct beliefs about that complex of entities you're experiencing, and those can be either true or false, as you stated.
I guess maybe it depends on what you mean by a fact. If you mean, are there states of affairs in the world? I don't think he ever even addresses that issue. I think he simply assumes that there are states of affairs in the world. But in terms of whether there's whether we can, the relationship of facts to truth is what he's talking about. I think he simply assumes that there are states of affairs in the world. Maybe I missed it.
Let me bring up two points.
Go ahead.
At the very end, at page 154, I'm kind of taking part of this. He's talking about something else, but he says, he's really saying knowledge, if it's based on exclusive and personal point of view in a body whose sense organs distort as much as they reveal. So what I think he's getting at there is that you can't know anything outside because you can't see outside your own prejudice and all that sort of thing. And then on page 140, he says, if truth consists in the correspondence of thought with something outside thought, thought can never know when truth has been attained.
I'm sorry, what?
140.
140.
If truth consists in the correspondence of thought with something outside thought, thought can never know when truth has been attained. You see it? It's in the last paragraph on 140. So but between those two, I think he's saying one is that we can never discern what is actually the other that thought corresponds to, because it's one that's distorted by our personal biases and all that. And the second is that thought can't know anything outside thought. It can't know the thing in itself, as Kant said.
But
I think he says you experience the thing in itself through acquaintance, and then you begin to make judgments about it.
What's acquaintance?
Acquaintance is perception, the perception of an external reality, of objective reality out there, the not self.
Right, and I think he's saying it can't be done. He can approximate it, but it can't be done.
He says somewhere that if you're acquainted with something, you can't go beyond that. That's there, and it's if it's positive, it's real and everything. You might misinterpret it with your beliefs and judgments about it. That's where error enters in.
But he says his facts because there's a quote on page 147 that says, when a belief is true, there is a corresponding fact in which the several objects of the belief form a single complex. This belief is said to constitute knowledge of this fact. And the fact he's talking about here is he's talking about that, like, who was it that loved who?
Desdemona. Loved Othello.
He says Desdemona, loving, and Othello are three facts, right? And that loving is a relationship between two of them. And that the word belief ties this into a fact. If there really is a fact, if Desdemona really does love Othello, then that fact exists. And the belief is true, and that's what truth is. But if there's no fact that she loves him, then it's an error, and the fact doesn't exist.
But what
so he believes that
what is the
fact
fact is what we're trying to say.
No, the fact doesn't exist. The complex fact doesn't exist that she loves him.
Oh, if
doesn't love
it's false.
him.
If the belief is false.
You can never talk about
the loving
truth
is
without
false.
falsehood.
The belief could be. Somebody could believe that she loves him, but it can't be a true belief since there's no fact of her love for him.
Right.
And so he goes into great detail about this subject, relation, object in a certain order, and that the belief ties it all together and makes it a fact. So I believe that's what he's calling
Well, only if
complex
it's a
facts.
one-to-one match.
What's a one-to-one match?
I don't think he can be saying that either there are no such things as facts or that we can't ever possibly get to them, because then this whole thing is nonsense.
Well, he does say on 147, knowledge is not a precise conception. It merges into probable opinion.
Right. No, that he does say.
Yes,
but that's not the same thing as saying that we can have no knowledge. He's saying that there always has to be doubt in knowledge unless it's either self-evident or knowledge by acquaintance, something like perception.
Okay,
essentially.
what he says is there's two different ways: by a judgment,
What
by
page
which
you
148. So we're all there, right at the top of the page.
Yeah.
Thus, in regard to any complex fact, there are theoretically two ways in which it may be known. He does say theoretically, by means of a judgment, in which its several parts are judged to be related as they are in fact related. That's one. Or two, by means of acquaintance with the complex fact itself, which may in a large sense be called perception, though it is by no means confined to objects of the senses. So the way of acquaintance is the fundamental thing. Everything that is, knowledge can be true or false, and beliefs can be true or false. Acquaintance is what it is. That's the reality you're dealing with and making judgments about, out of which everything
That's
else
just
is
the correspondence.
constructed.
We're back to the start. He's just using
That's right.
a different word.
That's right. That's all he ever
But he
says.
says they're theoretically.
That's why I emphasize that,
Right.
theoretically.
But the acquaintance is through senses, correct?
Well, perception, but mostly senses. It's at least senses.
No, it says perception, though it is by no means confined to
object
objects
of the senses.
Of the senses.
The senses, but it includes some.
Like,
Right.
for example,
Yes.
like Desdemona's acquaintance with her loving feelings is a form of acquaintance, but it's not with it's not with sensual perception.
Yes.
It's a
Right.
But
intuitive.
now then he
sense.
goes on to say, the way of acquaintance is only possible when there is really such a fact, while the first way, like all judgments, is liable to error. You can't talk about truth without talking about falsehood, because that's how you know where the truth is.
Sure.
And you have to assume non-contradiction to do logic.
Sure.
The second way gives us the complex whole, and therefore is only possible when its parts do actually have that relation which makes them combine to form such a complex.
Which means what?
Well, he talks about it somewhere else.
Oh.
He's starting to talk about coherence here. I mean, coherence, you can have several kinds of coherence. You can have two different theories and they can be coherent, but one of them may not be true, or they both may be partially true.
What about
Because coherence just means it's well-rounded and not internally contradictable.
What about as you all three know, that you can, the Earth is round or the Earth is flat, and you can prove both by the interpretation of different sense.
You could prove both?
Yes.
I'd like to
think
see you prove the Earth is flat.
Oh,
You'd have to meddle with the knowledge, with all kinds of things. I mean, the theory about global warming, there's two different theories. One says it's really happening, another says they're adding to it. Nobody really knows yet.
well, this is
Fighting over coherence.
This is a little different. It's simple. The Earth is round. As you look out in the horizon, they say that the universe bends space. So it's just simply bending space as we look out the Earth. And as we look from a satellite down, all we see is a flat, one-dimensional object. And it doesn't prove that the Earth is round. And you can go on and prove that the Earth is flat. Anyway, that's...
Sorry, what was your point, Jack?
The point was, there's a case where you've got a fact in that you've got these sense datas that, the horizon, you look out and it's round, or you can look down from space and see a round thing. But then you can come up with two different interpretations that are congruent. Both of them make sense by themselves. And so that's where
Well, if you stay on
Occam's
page
razor come in.
148, he has a sentence. This sort of self-evidence is an absolute guarantee of truth. What does he mean by that then?
yeah, what is it?
In all cases where we know by acquaintance a complex fact consisting of certain terms in a certain relation, we say that the truth that these terms are so related has the first or absolute kind of self-evidence. And in these cases, the judgment that the terms are so related must be true.
Okay, if going back to what Maureen was saying, that about complex, I'm looking for the exact page, it's if the two terms in that order are united by the relation into complex, the belief is true, if not it is false. What it seems to me is saying is if the complex is true, the belief is true, which is meaningless to me. So I'm reading something wrong there. Do you see what I'm saying?
Yeah, I know that was hard for me to. I think what he's talking about is if the complex exists as such in the outside world. That's what he's talking about. And then if if the belief has the same constituents of the complex if the belief has the same constituents in the same order, then it's true. If it doesn't have the same constituents as in the outside world, then it's not true. So I'm not sure exactly why I'm not sure exactly why he broke it down into the. I mean, I sort of have a vague understanding why he thought it was necessary to analyze this in terms of object terms and object relations.
Yeah, that was just thrown in, I think.
Yeah, I couldn't quite get that. But I think what he's saying is that the facts in the world exist as Desdemona. In the world, there's Desdemona, there's Cassio, and there's the relation of loving. Or like the cat is laying on the mat. You know, there's the cat, there's the mat, and there's the relation of lying on the mat. If that relation isn't tying those two things together in the real world, then a statement then a statement saying that the cat is on the mat has to be false.
Again, it gets down to tautology. It's just saying if it's true, it's true.
No, he's saying remember the truth is a property of statements, not the outside world.
Right.
So if the statements have the same constituents in the same order as they exist in the outside world, then it's true. I think that's what he was saying.
Yeah, I think he's saying if we don't have beliefs, if all we have is facts, then there's no falsehood.
Right.
Everything is true because facts are true.
Physical facts.
Right, physical facts.
They're true.
Okay, Jake.
They're just there.
You're true.
They're just there,
Jake's
right?
there, you know. He exists,
And we all agree.
right?
Yes.
Okay, but he's talking about whether a belief is true. If the cat wasn't on the mat, well, then if I believed that the cat was on the mat, it would be a false belief. But if the cat really was on the mat, outside of me, the real world outside of me, if the cat really was on the mat, then I have a true belief.
And that's the correspondence.
Whoopee.
Yeah.
Well,
But that's what he's saying. He's trying to define what truth is.
Yeah, but that's just
That he says you can't make up whether something is true just by thinking inside your mind. You
We know
have to
all that.
relate it to outside.
we know that.
Okay.
well, and that on page 144 where we're looking, he says, judging or believing is a certain complex unity of which a mind is a constituent. If the remaining constituents taken in the order which they have in the belief form a complex unity, that means if they're coherent, then the belief is true. If not, it is false. You know, he says that coherence is a test and a criteria, but it's not
Right.
the whole thing. You first have to have this intuition too. There has to be something that acquaintance is something you don't get to choose.
That one thing, last I'll bring it up, is he's saying if two terms in the belief are united by relation into a complex, the belief is true.
Where are you looking, Jack?
Yeah.
That's on
But that's,
And the
144.
example-
but that's if they're united. They might not be united.
Well, you could say the cat's on the rug, and it can be true or false. In both cases, that complex is united.
No,
That's
it's
not what he
not a
means.
true fact if the cat isn't on the mat.
But that's not what he's saying here.
Yes, he's saying. 'Cause
Yes, it is.
He says, if there's a complex unity, and here's the example he gives, Desdemona's love for Cassio. If Desdemona really does love Cassio, then there's this fact of her love for Cassio, and it exists.
Well, anyway.
Right?
I think what confused me was that he was talking about complex unities in both as properties of beliefs and as properties of the real world. and he didn't adequately. I mean, you guys obviously understood that. I didn't understand that originally, and I was getting confused with it because when he's talking about complex unities, I thought at first he was only referring to terms in a statement, and clearly he is returning. But no, he's not. He's referring to that.
Yeah,
but he's also referring to the complex. He's also referring to the facts in the world. That's the complex unity.
And the facts in the world are more basic.
What's that?
The facts in the world are more basic.
Are more basic, right?
Well, am I correct?
They're real. The others may or may not be.
Is kind of the true test, or the best test of knowledge is intuitive knowledge, and he doesn't define intuitive knowledge. Is that correct?
Right, he doesn't define
Okay,
it.
Well, he calls it
Although he
acquaintance.
does. Although it's one form of knowledge by acquaintance.
right.
Yeah.
So anyway, so after I took too much of her time, and something I still would argue, that we're coming to the end of the time. So what did you get out of this?
I have to say that my reaction to this was a little bit like yours. What I'm inferring yours to be. I understood his desire to clarify the concept of truth in such a way as to make it philosophically rigorous, and so that maybe, we don't have the whole. We don't have the whole thing, obviously. So maybe this was a prelude to further, further, clarifications of other issues once you have this thing clarified. I sort of appreciated that might be the case, but it seemed to me like it seemed like much ado about nothing. I just had this sense. I just had the sense that he was telling us stuff, which probably means I don't really understand it. That's always the first thing, is you don't really understand
That's always a good possibility.
If you think that it's much ado about nothing, somebody who's obviously as bright as Bertrand Russell, considerably brighter than me, if I think it's much ado about nothing, I probably don't understand it. But that was my first response.
Jake?
Well, the value of philosophy is that we should study it for the sake of the questions themselves, because these questions enlarge our conception of what is possible, enrich our intellectual imagination, and diminish the dogmatic assurance which closes the mind against speculation. But, above all, through the greatness of the universe which philosophy contemplates, the mind also is rendered great and becomes capable of that union with the universe which constitutes its highest good.
Brilliant.
We get a little piece of infinity is what he says. It's just very religious to me.
Okay.
I like the fact that he spent 2 chapters here talking about what's true, and then he says the value of philosophy is that it asks all these questions, none of which answers can be
Definitive,
demonstrably true.
Right.
And he loves it because you can't have a definitive answer to any really philosophical question.
Yeah,
But there
I was
are
hoping we could spend a little bit more
opinions.
time on that
There are
part of it, because
opinions.
that was really, I thought that was
That I
interesting.
understood.
Yeah, that part I got too.
Well, if you didn't
I got that
understand the
part.
first part, you don't understand that part.
Oh,
Maybe I
think you
guess
do.
I don't
I don't think
understand this.
It is,
I
it's
think it's
kind of,
necessary to get the first part.
I think there's a lot missing, because I certainly don't think I'm smarter than Russell, but I thought a lot of what he was saying was very incomplete and not.
Well, that might be his redactors.
He's also, the other thing I thought was that it wasn't because of any difficulty that he had in writing. I think he was a wonderful writer. I think he was clear.
Very orderly.
I thought it was as clear as you can be, but I didn't think.
I thought he was logical the way he explained his arguments.
Yeah.
Okay.
Which is why I was surprised at the end when he said, this is the value of philosophy, that we just ask questions, we can't prove the answers.
My takeaway from it, when he said that you can't have true knowledge. You can only have
Probable.
Yeah,
Well,
probable.
but some of it's high
Probable opinion he
probability
talks
for your
about.
time and place,
Yeah, right.
sufficient to act.
And it's useful. It's good enough for government work and building bridges.
Hope it's better than that.
and
Building
delivering the
bridges.
mail. But I thought that was interesting. After all of that talk, he just says, and that's kind of my takeaway. And I think it's valuable to know, is that that truth is never 100%.
Yeah, he thinks that there are some things that you can know with absolute certitude, but on the other hand, they're relatively trivial. They're absolutely foundational, but they're also relatively trivial. You could know that the truths of logic are with absolute certainty, he thinks.
If you accept
Yeah, right.
If you accept
But,
non-contradiction.
Right, if you accept non-contradiction. Yeah, but he says there are certain things you can know with certainty, so they're foundational, but they're trivial in a sense. They don't give you any of the answers about the kinds of things that he's talking about at the end that you were saying have no definitive answer. The philosophy, it's not philosophy's job to provide a definitive answer to those things.
But we're enlarging the soul is what we're doing.
That's
the purpose
what
of
he's
life
saying.
is to enlarge the soul.
Is to enlarge the soul.
And
right.
I wouldn't use the word soul, but enlarge our
well, I
ability
might have
to
made
look
up
into
that
things.
word. I don't know.
To look at new things. Well, it's good.
Is it in there?
Mind is rendered great, he said.
Yeah, the mind is, and I understand that part.
But he also said that, like, science has inventions that affect other people, but philosophy really only affects the person who studies it. And I disagree, because ideas like freedom and liberty and democracy, they've changed our world, and they all come from philosophy.
Well, I don't think he means that necessarily. But I mean, he's trying to say if you study philosophy, you'll be helped, and everybody's a philosopher.
No, he says there's some practical men who don't ask questions.
Well, that's how
and
they
they're
hide.
to be derided.
That's just because
and-
he's mad at those people who wouldn't picket with him when he wanted to stop the wars and all that stuff. I mean, everybody philosophizes to a certain extent. It's just very limited and narrow. You know, he says that everybody, whether they know it or not, is in touch with objective reality, and it's how you interpret it. And if you're really dumb, you just don't spend time learning what philosophy can teach you.
Yeah, but he says if the study of philosophy has any value at all for others and students of philosophy, it must be only indirectly through its effects upon the lives of those who study it.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we're the
Thank you.
He sure affected my studies of mathematics. I couldn't read that darn line.
I think philosophers changed
thank
the
you all.
world.
Of course they
They
did.
do. Yes,
This guy improved on Hume. Is what he was trying to do, I think.
I think he did.
I think so too.
Made a lot more sense
He
to
had,
me.
he had the same problem Hume had.
I'd be interested in. I mean, I know he was an atheist and relatively militant. Relatively militant agnostic. They talked in the introduction about this mystical illumination he had.
Yeah.
Did you
Yes.
read that thing?
No.
In the introduction,
I
he had,
didn't
he
put
had a
it in.
mystical illumination,
Wonder who that
and I'd be really interested in understanding what that was.
Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed the show. Join us next time as we discuss another great selection. As Aristotle said, the best way to learn is to get together in small groups and discuss great ideas.